In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how you can use Replan to allocate SNS and personnel across the pods you've chosen to complete dispensing within time limits. So for this demonstration, I'm going to actually start out with a plan. We're here in Dallas County, Texas again. So you can see each one of these little green triangles represents a pod location. They're all placed at primarily high schools, some middle schools, and a few other schools such as elementary schools and whatnot. These dark blue boundaries represent the catchment areas of each one of these pod locations. The catchment areas were formed specifically to send everyone to their closest pod location. So now once we have this, how do we determine whether we need, where we need to send our MRC, how we need to distribute them? So the first thing we can look at is household distribution across the pods. So the household distribution, it's not horrible, but it ranges from close to 40,000 all the way down to around 8,400. So there's quite a bit of variation here. So if these are non-medical pods, using the head of household model, the household times would look like this. So this is the times each pod, the amount of time each pod is going to require to be able to serve its entire population using the head of household model. So you can see some of these pods are well beneath this 36-hour deadline that we've imposed. Others are well beyond it. So for instance, pod 6, which is placed at North Dallas High School in this example plan, requires close to 66 hours to be able to complete dispensing. Of course, this is well beyond the CRI mandated time limits. So how do we solve this problem? Well, there's a couple of different ways you could solve this problem. You could either take a look at North Dallas High School and the surrounding area and choose another pod location in this area to be able to alleviate some of the burden, some of the population that it has to serve, or you could potentially rebalance the resources. So right now we have the same number of dispensing lanes at all pods, 30. Now what we can observe with this bar chart is that this pod here, all these pods that are green, the bars are green and they're well beneath the 36-hour deadline, they don't need as many dispensing booths as those that are in red, which are above the 36-hour deadline. So let's automatically rebalance the resources according to households. There we go, and now we see they're all green. So every pod can, with these parameters, treat its assigned population within 36 hours. Now, how did this happen? Well, we reallocated the number of dispensing booths among the pods. So what does this really mean? This means that at pods that have to serve smaller numbers of households, we have fewer dispensing lanes, and those that have to serve larger numbers of households, for example, this North Dallas High School, which required so many hours before, we have 56 dispensing lanes allocated now for that pod. Of course, as planners, if you say there's no way it can fit 56 lanes into North Dallas High School, then you will probably need to fall back to the previous strategy that I discussed and actually choose yet another pod location near that to be able to share the load imposed by the density of households in that area. Now, all that being said, what does this listing of numbers of dispensing lanes really tell you? Well, this tells you how to distribute your Medical Reserve Corps resources. And then you also need to know how to distribute your SNS resources. Well, it doesn't matter how many households you have in terms of SNS distribution. You need to know the populations that you're serving at each pod. Because just because you have 20,000 households, that doesn't mean you need 20,000 pill bottles. You may need 100,000 pill bottles. So you need to be able to determine this. And that's where the population distribution chart comes into play. So here you can look for each one of these pods, and you have the exact figures here in the table. you know exactly how many people, uh, based on Census Bureau data, are going to be served by each one of these pod locations. Therefore, you can use these figures to determine how many pallets of medical countermeasures need to be dropped off at each pod location.